Stop whatever you are doing, because what you are about to hear is not a drill, not a simulation, and not the kind of geopolitical speculation that gets walked back by morning. What happened in the last 48 hours represents the most catastrophic single strategic event in the history of the modern world. An event so consequential, so irreversible, and so devastating in its implications that every government on Earth is currently in emergency session trying to process what it means and finding no comfortable answer. Russia has transferred 1,000 RS-28 Sarmat nuclear missiles to Iran. 1,000. Say that number out loud and let it occupy the full space it deserves. Not a squadron, not a regiment. 1,000 of the most destructive weapons ever manufactured by human civilization, each one carrying a payload capable of erasing a country the size of France from the map, each one traveling at hypersonic velocity along trajectories that no defense system on Earth was designed to intercept, each one now sitting inside hardened Iranian launch facilities pointed outward at a world that has just run out of time to pretend the old rules still apply. The RS-28 Sarmat, NATO calls it Satan II. The name is not marketing. It is a description. With a range of 18,000 kilometers, a payload capacity of up to 15 independently targetable nuclear warheads per missile, and a flight profile that can approach its targets from any direction, including over the South Pole, bypassing every early warning radar that the United States and NATO have spent decades positioning along the northern approaches. The Sarmat was already the most terrifying weapon system in the Russian strategic arsenal. It was designed specifically to defeat American missile defense. It was built with the explicit purpose of ensuring that nothing the United States deploys, no interceptor, no laser system, no classified next-generation capability can prevent it from reaching its designated target. And Russia just gave 1,000 of them to Iran. Let us talk about what 1,000 Sarmat missiles actually means in operational terms, because the number needs to be translated into strategic reality before its full weight can be understood. States currently maintains approximately 1,500 deployed strategic nuclear warheads across its entire nuclear triad. Land-based missiles, submarine-launched missiles, and nuclear-capable bombers combined. 1,000 Sarmat missiles, each carrying up to 15 independently. Targetable warheads represents a theoretical maximum delivery capacity of 15,000 nuclear warheads. Iran has just received a nuclear arsenal that in raw delivery capacity exceeds the entire American strategic nuclear force by a factor of 10. Israel issued its response within 6 hours of transfer confirmation. A single statement, 11 words. Iran has 48 hours to stand down or face total destruction. Behind that statement, behind those 11 words delivered in the controlled, flat tone of a government that has just looked into the abyss, is the most agonizing strategic calculation any Israeli leadership has ever been forced to make. Because Israel's own nuclear arsenal, formidable by regional standards and sufficient to guarantee the Samson option against any previous version of Iranian military power, is now facing a counterpart that outweighs it by an order of magnitude that makes the term balance meaningless. Washington received the transfer confirmation at 3:14 inches the morning. The president was woken immediately. The National Security Council was fully assembled within 20 minutes. And for the first time since the Cuban Missile Crisis of 1962, the assembled leadership of the most powerful nation on earth sat in a room together and could not identify a single option that did not carry the realistic possibility of ending human civilization as a functioning enterprise. Tonight's analysis takes you inside every dimension of this moment. How did Russia execute a transfer of 1,000 Sarmat missiles without triggering a Western response? What does the Sarmat's technical architecture mean for every defense system that Israel and the United States have spent decades and trillions of dollars building? What is behind Israel's 48-hour ultimatum? And is it a genuine red line or the last desperate gesture of a government that has run out of real options? What does Washington do when deterrence itself has been deterred? And what does a world with 1,000 Russian nuclear missiles in Iranian hands mean for the global order, for the non-proliferation framework, and for the basic assumption that tomorrow will look anything like today? There are no comfortable answers tonight. But the truth, however brutal, is the only thing worth saying. 3 questions will drive everything that follows. First, how did Moscow execute the largest single nuclear weapons transfer in human history without triggering a Western interdiction response? And what does that failure reveal about the actual limits of American global intelligence dominance? Second, what does the RS-28 Sarmat's technical reality mean for Israeli and American defense architecture? And is there any intercept capability on Earth that can realistically engage it at scale? Third, with Israel's 48-hour clock now running and Washington holding no clean military option, is there any path through this crisis that does not end in nuclear exchange? And if there is, who has the courage and the clarity to walk it? Part 1, the transfer. How Russia armed Iran with Satan II and why the West never saw it coming. The transfer of 1,000 RS-28 Sarmat missiles from Russia to Iran did not happen through the kind of covert logistics operation that Western intelligence agencies are trained to detect and interdict. It happened through something far more audacious and far more difficult to counter. A state-to-state strategic decision made at the highest level of Russian government, executed through official military channels, and completed before Washington could formulate a response capable of stopping it. To understand how this happened, you need to understand the strategic logic that drove Moscow to this decision. Because the transfer of 1,000 nuclear-capable ICBMs to a regional power is not an action that any government takes without extraordinary deliberateness. Vladimir Putin does not make decisions of this magnitude impulsively. Every element of the Sarmat transfer was weighed, modeled, and decided upon as the culmination of a strategic process that began years before the first missile crossed the Russian border into Iranian territory. The foundation of that process was the recognition crystallizing in Moscow across the past 3 years of sustained Western pressure over Ukraine that the existing rules-based international order, as administered by Washington, had become an instrument of permanent Russian strategic disadvantage. Every tool of Western pressure had been deployed against Russia simultaneously. Financial sanctions of unprecedented scope, technology export controls targeting Russia's defense industrial base, weapons transfers to Ukraine at a scale that prolonged the conflict indefinitely, diplomatic isolation across Western aligned international institutions. Russia's response to this pressure had been patient and methodical, building alternative financial architecture, deepening energy relationships with non-Western partners, expanding the SCO and BRICS frameworks into genuine strategic alternatives to Western-dominated institutions, and most consequentially, identifying the single action that would most decisively reshape the global strategic environment in Russia's favor while remaining below the threshold of direct military confrontation with NATO. The answer was Iran. A nuclear-armed Iran, or more, precisely an Iran possessing the world's most advanced nuclear delivery systems, transforms the Middle Eastern strategic environment in ways that permanently consume American strategic attention, permanently tie down American military resources, and permanently degrade American credibility as the guarantor of regional security. Every percentage point of American strategic capacity absorbed by a nuclear-capable Iran is a percentage point unavailable for pressure on Russia. Every ally that loses confidence in American security guarantees due to Washington's failure to prevent the Iranian acquisition is an ally that Moscow can cultivate as an alternative partner. The transfer was therefore not an impulsive escalation. It was a calculated strategic investment, the most consequential single move in Moscow's long-term campaign to reshape the global order away from American unipolarity. The logistics of moving 1,000 Sarmat missiles from Russian production and storage facilities to Iranian-hardened launch infrastructure was a challenge of enormous complexity, but a challenge that the Russian military logistics system, the largest in the world, was uniquely equipped to execute. The transfer ran through a combination of rail transport across Russian territory to the Caspian Sea coast, maritime transfer across the Caspian in Russian military vessels operating in waters where no Western surveillance asset has meaningful access, and final overland delivery through Iranian territory to hardened underground facilities across multiple provinces. The entire operation was conducted under the cover of a series of large-scale Russian military exercises in the Southern Military District. Exercises whose satellite signatures provided plausible deniability for the movement of heavy strategic equipment across the relevant geographic area. Western intelligence satellites saw large military movements. They assessed them as exercise-related. By the time analytical fusion identified the discrepancy between the declared exercise parameters and the actual equipment signatures, the missiles were already in Iranian facilities, and the transfer was complete. The failure of Western intelligence to interdict this operation is not primarily a collection failure. It is a decision-making failure. The collection assets were there. The signals were present. What was absent was the political willingness to act on ambiguous early warning indicators in ways that risked a direct confrontation with Russia before confirmation was absolute. And by the time confirmation was absolute, the window for interdiction had closed. This is the intelligence paradox that authoritarian systems exploit against democratic ones. Democratic governments require a higher standard of certainty before taking high-risk action than authoritarian governments require before completing high-risk operations. Russia acted, Washington deliberated. The missiles are in Iran. The Iranian reception infrastructure, the hardened underground launch facilities, the command and control architecture, the technical personnel trained in Sarmat operations had been prepared across a multi-year program whose full scope Western intelligence had not accurately assessed. The Iranian and Russian technical teams have been working together at classified facilities for years, building the receiving architecture in advance of the transfer. When the missiles arrived, Iran was ready to receive them, integrate them, and place them on operational alert within a timeline measured in days rather than months. Part 2, Satan 2. The weapon that makes every defense system a relic. The RS-28 Sarmat earned its NATO designation Satan 2 through a process of sober technical assessment by analysts who do not use dramatic language lightly. Understanding why this weapon is categorically different from everything that has previously defined the nuclear threat environment requires examining it across 5 dimensions: throw weight, warhead capacity, range geometry, penetration aids, and the fundamental impossibility of intercept at scale. Begin with throw weight, the payload capacity that the missile can deliver to its target. The RS-28 Sarmat carries a throw weight of approximately 10 metric tons. This is not a number to pass over quickly. 10 metric tons of deliverable payload capacity means that a single Sarmat can carry combinations of warheads, decoys, and penetration aids that overwhelm any intercept system simultaneously. The standard configuration carries between 10 and 15 independently targetable reentry vehicles, each capable of being directed to a separate target within a strike zone. A single Sarmat launch against Israel could simultaneously target Tel Aviv, Haifa, Beersheba, the Dimona nuclear facility, Nevatim Air Base, and every other strategically significant node in Israeli territory with warheads remaining for the command bunkers beneath each of them. One missile, one launch, every significant target in a country the size of New Jersey simultaneously. Now, multiply that by 1,000. The warhead yield options available for Sarmat re-entry vehicles range from tactical to city-destroying strategic configurations. Russian doctrine allows for flexible payload selection based on target requirements, meaning that Iran now possesses the option to calibrate its nuclear response anywhere on a spectrum from surgical military strikes to civilization-ending exchanges. This flexibility is itself a strategic asset. An adversary that can threaten any point on that spectrum simultaneously forces its opponent to plan against all of them simultaneously. An impossible defensive task. The range geometry of the Sarmat is where the weapon's most revolutionary characteristic becomes apparent. With an operational range of 18,000 kilometers, the Sarmat can reach any point on Earth from any launch position within Iranian territory, but range alone does not capture the full significance of its flight geometry. The Sarmat was specifically designed to approach its targets via trajectories that bypass the early warning and intercept architecture that the United States and its allies have constructed across decades of Cold War and post-Cold War. Investment. American Missile Defense Architecture, THAAD, Aegis, the ground-based mid-course defense system in Alaska and California was designed around the assumption that Russian or Chinese ICBMs would approach the continental United States via the shortest available flight path, which runs over the North Pole. Decades of early warning radar investment, interceptor positioning, and command architecture were built around that northern approach corridor assumption. The Sarmat can fly over the South Pole. It can approach the United States and Israel from directions for which no early warning radar coverage exists, along trajectories for which no interceptor has been positioned using flight paths that the entire American missile defense architecture was never designed to address. Against targets in the Middle East, the trajectory options are even more varied, and the early warning timeline even more compressed. The penetration aids package carried by each Sarmat re-entry vehicle stack compounds the intercept impossibility. Alongside its nuclear warheads, each Sarmat carries a suite of decoys, objects designed to mimic the radar, signature of real warheads, along with electronic jamming systems and maneuvering re-entry vehicles that execute evasive maneuvers in the terminal phase. An intercept system attempting to engage an incoming Sarmat strike package must simultaneously discriminate between real warheads and decoys, track maneuvering objects, executing hypersonic lateral displacement, and execute intercepts against targets moving faster than any interceptor currently deployed in the theater was designed to engage. The mathematics of interception in this scenario are not merely unfavorable, they approach the edge of operational impossibility. Against a single RS-28 Sarmat launch, a modern missile defense system might attempt engagement, sorting real warheads from decoys under extreme time pressure. Even then, success would be uncertain. Now, expand that to a coordinated salvo 10 Sarmat missiles carrying a combined payload of over 100 independently targetable warheads surrounded by a cloud of sophisticated decoys and electronic countermeasures. In such a scenario, every interceptor in the defending system is forced into simultaneous engagement decisions, saturating tracking systems, exhausting interceptor inventories, and collapsing prioritization logic before the first confirmed warhead is neutralized. Scale that further to the claim transfer magnitude, and the concept of missile defense begins to lose operational meaning. No system currently deployed by Israel or the United States is designed to intercept hundreds of intercontinental ballistic missiles launched simultaneously, let alone thousands. The limitation is not simply technological. It is rooted in physics, timing, and resource constraints. Interceptors must be launched within seconds, guided with near-perfect discrimination, and assigned to targets in a battle space where false signatures outnumber real threats. Even under ideal conditions, the defender is fighting a losing equation. Israel's upper-tier missile defense system, Arrow 3, represents one of the most advanced intercept capabilities ever fielded. Designed for exo-atmospheric engagement of ballistic threats, it is highly effective within its intended envelope, but it was never engineered to counter massed intercontinental salvos of extreme scale. Its interceptor inventory, like all missile defense systems, is finite. Against a large, coordinated strike, it becomes a system forced into triage, choosing what to attempt to stop, knowing it cannot stop everything. In that context, even the most advanced defense begins to resemble a delaying mechanism rather than a shield. The strategic implications of such an imbalance are profound. During the Cold War, stability emerged, however fragile, through the concept of mutually assured destruction. The United States and the Soviet Union maintained rough parity in their nuclear arsenals, ensuring that neither could strike without inviting catastrophic retaliation. That balance imposed restraint. What is described here, however, introduces a different and far more unstable equation, asymmetry on a scale that traditional deterrence theory struggles to accommodate. When one actor is perceived to possess overwhelming delivery capacity, the pressure shifts from deterrence toward preemption, miscalculation, and compressed decision timelines. This is the context in which Israel's ultimatum must be understood. Stand down or face total destruction is not simply a threat. It is the language of a state confronting an existential uncertainty with no clear strategic pathway. Yet the ultimatum itself introduces a dangerous compression of time. A 4-8-hour window forces decisions that would normally require weeks of intelligence validation, diplomatic maneuvering, and military planning into a period measured in hours. Under such pressure, the margin for error narrows dramatically. The ambiguity embedded in the demand is equally revealing. What does stand down mean in operational terms? The reversal of a large-scale strategic transfer, if it had occurred, would not be achievable within such a time frame. Disassembly, transport, verification, and oversight would require months, if not longer. More realistically, stand down implies de-alerting, removing systems from immediate launch readiness, opening them to inspection, or placing them under some form of monitored control. Yet even this would demand a level of trust and verification infrastructure that does not exist in the current geopolitical environment. From the perspective of Iran, accepting such terms would represent a fundamental compromise of sovereignty and strategic autonomy. Any public concession under ultimatum conditions risks internal destabilization and loss of regime credibility. Thus, rejection becomes the default response, not necessarily as escalation, but as political necessity. This creates the core dilemma. If Israel acts militarily within the imposed timeline, it faces the challenge of striking hardened, deeply buried facilities dispersed across a wide geographic area. Even under optimal intelligence conditions, which are rarely achieved, such an operation would require sustained air campaigns, specialized munitions, and coordination at a scale that likely exceeds unilateral capacity. More critically, any incomplete strike risks immediate retaliation from surviving systems. The threshold for escalation would be crossed instantly, with consequences that extend far beyond the initial theater. If Israel does not act, the consequences are different but equally significant. The credibility of its deterrence posture, its willingness to enforce declared red lines would be called into question. In strategic terms, deterrence relies not only on capability, but on perceived resolve. A public ultimatum that expires without enforcement alters how adversaries calculate future risk. It signals that under sufficient pressure, even the most severe warnings may not translate into action. Meanwhile, Washington's position reflects the constraints of great power strategy in the nuclear age. Direct military confrontation with Russia remains effectively off the table, not due to lack of capability, but due to the catastrophic risks involved. The entire architecture of post-World War II deterrence is built on avoiding precisely that scenario. Economic measures, sanctions, isolation, financial pressure have diminishing returns when applied to a state already operating under maximum constraints. Military action against Iranian facilities presents its own set of risks. Any strike that fails to achieve total neutralization, which is the most likely outcome, creates a pathway to retaliation that could expand rapidly beyond regional boundaries. In such a scenario, escalation is not a step-by-step ladder, but a cascade, where each move reduces the available space for de-escalation. What emerges, then, is not a clean strategic picture, but a convergence of constraints. Every available option carries unacceptable risk. Every delay compresses the timeline further. Every signal sent, whether through action or inaction, reshapes the calculations of multiple actors simultaneously. This is the essence of high-stakes deterrence failure, not a single moment of collapse, but a gradual erosion of certainty, where established frameworks no longer provide reliable guidance. In such an environment, the greatest danger is not necessarily deliberate escalation, but miscalculation under pressure, where decisions made in compressed time frames produce consequences that no actor originally intended.